All right, guys, here we go. So now we're done with our color wheel. We want to start producing, we got all of our primaries, our secondaries, tertiaries, they're all opposite each other. Off to the side here, we have a little bit more room over here. Get this centered in the screen here a little bit. We're gonna work off of this left-hand side or right-hand side, depends on which side you started with. And we're gonna measure, use like your actual ruler, and we're gonna measure out sort of 9-inch area. So I'm gonna measure from 1 to 9 here. There's my 1 to 9. All right, I just used the width of the ruler, was totally fine for that. All right, and now I'm gonna go along, now that I have that, I'm gonna make a little tick mark every inch because I need 9 squares. This is going to be for our value scale. We want to take one color and approach how we can thin out right now our color so that more of the paper is showing through, and it's going to appear to be lighter, whiter, as if we're adding white to the color. We physically can't add the white, but the white is coming from how thin our color is, all right, and how much of the paper we can see through. And then on the opposite end, that's for our tints, on the opposite end, we're going to be playing out our shades very slowly, adding our darks until we get a very dark black. So here we go. We have, here's 1, we're gonna say number 1, that equals white, okay? So we just have the white paper there, okay? We have 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the halfway zone, okay? This should be sort of a rich, pure color. Sort of that same really rich color that we have over here, right? It's sort of the middle of the road. And then we're gonna do 6, 7, 8, 9 is black, because that's the darkest value any color could be. Because value, white and blacks are values, they help change things, but they are not actually colors themselves, right? They're not on our wheel anywhere. So we're gonna slowly kind of make our way a little bit darker and lighter. I'm gonna start with the middle first. All right, so let me get my water set up here. Get my agua, get my paper towel. All right, so I've got myself set up. I got a little water, got my paper towel, okay. Now I'm going to come over to my paint tray. I'm going to get my brush back out there. All right. Okay, so I'm going to work with the color red. All right, so here I am with my red. Let me actually kind of move this stuff over so we can see it a little bit better and we get it all in sort of the same screen area, except for my water. All right, so I'm going to wet my brush, right? And I'm going to work out of my little tray down here, and I'm going to get myself a really good red. Well, actually, you know, I still have some of my nice red left over from earlier today. So one of the things about watercolor is that you can reactivate it, right? Now, I'm going to make sure it's nice and rich though, so I'm going to keep adding some more really rich red directly from the cake in there. So it's really, really ruby red, okay? It's not sticky or pasty, it's not dry. It does have a little bit of water in there to kind of make it movable, but it's not oozing and runny, all right? I'm gonna take this out just so I have a little bit more mixing space in here. Let's see if we can remove this guy. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna paint this pure red right here where I have pure written. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? All right, so I got my pure red, gonna keep coming in here because my goal is I want this whole little cubed area to to resemble the same kind of red. It shouldn't look like it's changing at all in this square. So I want to kind of keep my red as evenly consistent as possible. Okay, so I've covered him in as easily as I can with consistency. Now, what I want to do is I want to start, and some people like to start with the light end, some people like to start with the pure end. I'm going to start with the light end. I'm going to come down here, and I'm really going to wash out my brush, and I'm going to get myself, look at this. It's so see-through and runny. Look at that. Compared to this is very, very runny, okay? I'm even going to add some more water to it. And again, the more water equals more white of the paper that we're going to see through. And number 2 is right next to white. So it should be so very pale of a pink, really. I'm barely even getting any red hue onto this surface. Look at how pale that is, right? Look at that, very, very light. Look how thick that is, right? So we want a very pale, transparent, light tint of our color. For us, we don't have white to use, okay? We're using water to thin out the color. So we're tinting really with water and the color of the paper, which is white. Now, in case you have any like pooling, if something kind of pools a little bit, that's when I use my paper towel nearby and I kind of clear off my brush. And if the brush is kind of dry, you can, it'll soak it back up right inside of there and it'll kind of dry any blotches or big drops of water that you might have left behind. All right, now, so that was the light one, right? Now, what happens when you put something wet next to something wet? It's gonna ooze from one to the other. So what I'm gonna do is I'm putting this on hold, all right? Because I don't wanna paint here because this isn't dry yet. You with me so far? Good, all right. So now I'm gonna go to the opposite end and let's come over here. This is a little bit dry already. It shouldn't ooze together because it's not soaking wet anymore. So I'm now gonna take and let's start a new red section down here. I'm gonna get this going with my cake again. Ooh, cake, that sounds good. All right, so I'm gonna get this going down here, nice and thick. There we go. It's thick, yet it's still pliable. It's not like dried out thick. And now I'm gonna need to add a little tiny bit of black into here because the next step from here is getting darker by adding black to it. Now, don't need much, but I wanna see that there's a change. So I barely took a little bit on my brush here and it's starting to change a little bit, but I don't think it changed enough. So I'm gonna swipe over it one more time, just very lightly. Oh, wow, I think I went too far now. Oh, good heavens, see how far that went? All right, so that means I need to rinse off my brush, come back around to the red side here, and let's start adding some more red back in. Okay, by adding more of the red pigment, look at that, it took it away from that scary, scary dark, okay? But this is now darker. You can kind of see it's darker than my original red. So it's just a little bit, it's like a next step up. So I'm gonna paint that right here. Ooh, that looks good. So you can see already, we already have sort of a nice change. Notice how I'm dragging along the edges. We talked about how if you drag along the edge, it'll make a nice cleaner line for you over there. Drag and drag. All right, and then I'm trying to keep as much of this color, again, as consistent as I can all over. So it doesn't go from like light to dark and light to dark in the middle of all that. So look at that nice change. All right, Now, this is probably allowed, while I've been working on this, allowed this to dry up a little bit so it's not just super, super oozy wet. All right, so I've rinsed out my brush a little bit. Now we're gonna go back to the pink end, okay? We're gonna keep going. So there's my original, let me come back up this way. There is my original watered down pink color that I now need to add a little bit more pure color to. So I dabbled a little bit into my red here. It's still very, very runny, okay? And let's see what this looks like. Oh, there we go. We're starting to get a little bit more pink out of it. You can still see that there's a lot of white paper shining through, right? That's part of a tint, okay? But it's definitely different than the first one. It's bumped up a notch, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. Okay, wonderful. Okay, might need to blow on this to let it dry a little bit. Okay, we'll get this moving. I can't really move on to this one because that's very saturated. This one we just did, so I'm gonna hop around again, okay? I'm gonna take a little bit, and since we know this last area is black, right? I'm gonna come and I'm going to add black to my palette down here. Okay, see how it's nice and flowy? Okay, flowy is a good word for it or not, but we're down there flowy. And so here I am with the dark side. Thank you, Luke. To the dark side. We're going to paint this our solid black. And again, if you let your brush and your color get a little too thin, it's going to look more like a dark gray than it is black. So we want to make sure that we're still picking up color. All right, dragging. All right. And that seems very even all over. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush. And I may need to, since I worked with a little bit of black here, I'm going to spill out the water, get some fresh stuff since I have to go back to the light side. The rebels. All right, so now I'm gonna come back down here and see how he's doing. He's doing pretty good. All right. So we're going to add some more to the light side. I'm going to try and fill in the gap here in step 4. All right, I'm going to come in here, add some more red to it. Okay, hopefully it doesn't feel as thick and pasty as this did, because see, that's where I pulled off of here a whole bunch. I'm diffusing that with water over here. So it's definitely thinner and runnier, which equals, yes, a lighter color or value. Lovely. So this pumps it up just a little bit more, but it doesn't make it that full, rich, positive hue that we started with. Look at that. Soak up part of that. That's a beaut. All right. So now I'm working on the dark side. So that means I need to add a little bit more of the black into here, right? Because we want this to get a little bit richer. Okay, I'm getting a little bit darker over here. All right, it's almost kind of turning a burgundy color. There we go. There's my wine color that I need. We'll try and do that. Now, of course, I'm going to have to blow a little bit on this paper here to kind of finish this last one, because I don't want it to ooze into my black section or into this section that I'm currently finishing. So I'm going to need to speed dry this a little bit. If you're at home, you know, one of the other things you could do, and I do this a lot when I've worked with watercolor, and we do it here in the studio, is I have hair dryers. So you can kind of go and blow a hair dryer on it to kind of speed dry a section so they don't ooze into each other. Okay. All right. right, I'm gonna add some more black here to our little section here. And keep in mind, we want this to be a very, very dark red, okay? Now, it might look a little black to you at home, but of course, we're one step away. This actually turns into a really dark red plum color. It's crazy. So I'm gonna start down here on this end. And if you can see, when it starts to spread out, you can see how it looks a little bit like a dirty brown color. I don't know how, I think you can kind of see a little difference between here and here. So it's nice and dark, but it's not totally black, right? So here we have it. We have my value scale from white to pure, and then to shades, all the way to black. All right, the value scale in watercolor.